Hey guys, welcome to Open Journal Radio. Is kind of the working title of what I'm going to be calling this series, which I guess I decided. Because I normally, whenever I record my drawings, I do time lapses, but I've yet to I did one instance already of me just kind of talking out loud about thoughts I'm experiencing while I'm drawing, kind of talking to no one in particular. I guess talking to myself. Recorded it, and I realized that I really liked not only drawing, but also speaking about stuff that's on my mind. And realized, people on the internet might want to hear this. Not everyone, but someone, right? Well, anyways, so Open Journal Radio is kind of the idea, just because it's kind of a loose format, right? The idea of a radio show, sort of just some guy talking to you while he does something, and assuming that my thoughts are pleasant or thoughts that you would want it to be in your brain, then, you can listen in. And either way, I'll just be uploading it to the vast void of the internet, cyberspace. But yeah, so I've been working on this piece for a while now. I probably started sometime in December, I think it was. Maybe even earlier than that, I'm not exactly sure. It started with this guy. He's drinking some sort of alien alcohol of some kind, I'm assuming. And I was kind of picturing it being like an alien bar with a bunch of zany characters. And slowly but surely it started building out. A lot of the times when I draw my faces, I like to kind of add the goopy, dissolving sort of, I don't know what you call that. But just I guess his head just kind of melting. I don't know, something about drawing faces that are melting is just really fun for me. So I do that a lot. And then it started with just the face and the melting face, and then it kind of slowly turned into this idea of a guy chugging alien alcohol that's making him dissolve, and his friends behind him can see it and they're all freaking out, but the guys over here are just cheering him on as he continues to chug. And then I actually had a class where we had a project to draw a crowd scene with 30 figures in it, so I ended up adding these little guys that count as figures. And I think it kind of just adds to the fun of the whole thing, which I like. Just the idea of little tiny people existing on the bar. But anyways, I'm going to go in and I'm just going to add sort of, I guess just value to the bar, because right now it's just all white. I think it kind of needs some shading or something. But I want to do this without distracting from the small little tiny figures that are on here. I don't want to, if I use a bigger marker, I don't want the weight of the line to be larger than these guys, because I think it would distract. So I'm going to be using this little tiny, already worn out pen just to add some texture and some value. But yeah, an interesting thought that I've been having with starting the show is kind of what if I don't have enough thoughts to say out loud? It's kind of a one immediately that I'm having. And it's funny because it reminded me of sort of the feeling of starting to pursue drawing in the first place, which is just that what if I don't have enough ideas to draw? If that makes sense, I'm gonna run out or something. And maybe, I don't know, you could probably ask the same thing of a musician, right? What if you run out of songs to play? And it's this funny thing where it's I don't know if that's possible. And it's funny because there's definitely a fear I have, I guess, of being repetitive in nature, or saying something that's not original or whatever it could be. But then I've had this thought of do I really believe that there's anything that's truly original in this world? Any story that's never been told, nothing that's ever been done. It feels there's the quote, I think it's from the Bible in Ecclesiastes, but it's there's nothing new under the sun. And even way back then, it's an interesting thought, right? Because was he right then? Because that guy didn't even know about the internet. Or modern science and all of the secrets that science has revealed to us about the universe. But it's interesting because there is some sort of, I guess, perspective that you could take about there being nothing new under the sun, right? Even though we have all this new technology, and it's incredible and marvelous and incomprehensible. There's 8 billion humans, and we're all doing our thing to varying levels of pleasure or suffering. I know that I'm definitely in a very privileged position to be able to draw and to share it with people and to have this kind of be my career path. But besides the point, I guess more the idea was, I suppose, thinking about if there's anything new under the sun. And the truth is, like, yeah, we're getting better at new technology and all that sort of stuff. But, like, realistically, haven't we already kind of run out of stories? Like, not really, Not in the sense that there's never going to be anything that's not exciting again. But more like, for example, drawing, what I'm doing right now, right? I am not breaking any new ground by doing this. I'm not even breaking any new ground by recording it and talking to it. Like, for myself, I am, right? Think back to, like, Bob Ross, right? The guy, public service television guy. I believe that was PBS. I could be wrong. But, definitely this show is inspired a lot by his show. Perhaps this is less about the technique of me drawing and more about just me talking about whatever comes to my mind. I don't really need to explain myself like Bob Ross does, where he talks about the trees and how to draw them and the technique, so to speak, or even what he's using. Like, I do want to talk about that a little bit, I guess, with my pens and stuff. And maybe even like what I'm making. But I don't really want it to be the main point. I think the main thing I want this show to be is just a place for me to think out loud. A really big idea of open journal is just that, right? Like, it's this idea of, I want my internal, I guess, monologue to be externalized, to be open. I want my journal to be open. And I think it's in that process of sharing our introspective thoughts, right? Or our intimate parts of ourselves where we can actually truly find happiness. And, there's lots of different forms of happiness, lots of different ways that people are happy or enjoy themselves or enjoy their time. But I do think there's this idea of this construct of self that we experience and the sort of, thoughts and sensations that occur to this organism. And, over the course of a period of time, and it's true for every single person, they're all having something going on in their head. Although apparently some people, they don't think words, they think in like visually, which is interesting. But I definitely think in words. I kind of think in pictures too, but mainly words. I can imagine images, but it's not my natural sort of state of being. Either way, I believe that to be fully happy, maybe not fully happy, that's maybe unfair to say, but a really big part of it is the feeling as though your voice is not only heard, but listened to. Like, truly, not just like, in the same way that I could say, I can make a noise on the street and anyone would hear me. That they're hearing me. But it's another thing entirely to be listened to. But I think a lot of people give up trying to be listened to. They just play their part. They do the things they got to do to survive. And maybe they have a few intimate people in their life that makes them feel listened to, right? Like their partner or their, a few friends. And I suppose there isn't really a number of people, right, that equates to or equals happiness. And certainly happiness is a lot more than just being listened to. But at the same time, I do believe it's a very important process of experiencing love or experiencing happiness that we find our own voice. And not just a voice that we have constructed, right? Like a voice that we have, or an identity that we have built out for others to perceive in a sort of performative way, but a voice that we feel is truly representative of an internalized version of ourselves. I think a lot about this concept I learned in a class one time. The Johari's window. It's like a concept of self, and it's like, I could actually draw this now that I think about it. It's funny. It's basically a 4-panel idea. That's why it's called the window. But there's I think it's like the known self or something. Or maybe the visible self. Doesn't really matter. But this is basically like, you know it, and others know it. And then there's the hidden self, which is the idea of like the part of you that you know, but others don't know, right? And then there's I think this is the unknown self, or something like that. I mean, it doesn't really matter what it's called. You get the idea, right? But it's just like, you don't know it, but others know it about you, right? Like the things that people perceive about you that you don't know about yourself. And then I think the most interesting part is the invisible self, which is the part of you that neither you know nor others know. But it's still a part of you, hypothetically, right? It's like the deep subconscious part that will maybe eventually become any other, parts of this category, right? Like this information or this experience or sensation will end up manifesting itself to be known by you or others in some capacity. But either way, I just think that's interesting. Something I think about a lot. Maybe not a lot, but definitely informs my narrative. And I think in general, as we continue to evolve and change, the more that we can reduce sort of the hidden self, right? The feeling of hiding information from others about ourselves that we know about ourselves, the more that we can merge and combine the known self and the hidden self, the more, I guess, like freedom you feel. That's the word, freedom, maybe. So it's just a feeling of like, I can go through spaces and tell people everything I got going on in my life. And I don't need to be afraid of what they're going to think about it, or what they're going to see about it, or anything. Like, I know myself, and I want them to see it too, and I want them to know it too. And the more words that I can put on it, the more free, I guess, I feel to share those aspects of my existence. And it's interesting because, I don't think you don't need to share stuff to be happy. Maybe I do more than others, like, why am I talking to a phone in the middle of my room and putting on the internet for people to listen to? I realize that there's an aspect of my personality that is an entertainer of some kind. That's kind of my role in society that I've given myself, or at least feel as though I experience. It's like, I really want to provide entertainment or some sort of that sort of value for people in their lives. It's something that I really want to be involved in. Why I love drawing, right? I mean, I love drawing because the sensation of drawing is really, really fun. But once you start realizing that you can show other people and they can see the sort of thoughts that you were having while you drew it, or like are able to interpret the image, interpret the text in their own way with a, you were encoding information into this. I am encoding information into this right now as I'm even providing these little sketch marks, little scratches on the surface. And I know that not everyone's gonna really see this, but like people that choose to look are gonna see the little tiny marks I'm making. And it, whether or not they see it, it's still there, right? And I get to see it. So it's exciting and cool and fun, and I like it a lot. I wish I could remember what I was talking about at the beginning of this, because it was kind of interesting, I think. It doesn't really matter. I like the whole conversation that we had about the known self and the unknown self. I guess I was talking about like open journal and blah, blah, blah. Finding your creative voice, being open and transparent about it, and how much you can grow from that, or at least personally, that's what I've experienced. The radio show, what the point of it is, all that kind of stuff. I don't know. There's a bunch of different ideas that I can think of right now. One of them being peer pressure, I guess, because I'm thinking about this guy that's drinking the alcohol that's making his head melt. What peer pressure is. It seems to always just... Oh, I was talking about like nothing new under the sun. I remember that. That was an interesting idea. Yeah, nothing new under the sun, no new story ever told. There is an idea, and I can even marry the ideas of peer pressure and that, right? Which is just this funny idea or feeling where despite all the new technology and all of the incredible new things that are happening in this world, you can see that there's just patterns that are so much bigger and more important and more powerful than us. For example, the need to be accepted in a social group or community, or just need to be accepted in general, right? Socially, like no matter what we develop as technology, it all kind of serves the same end that like humans have always been feeling and experiencing, like the need for acceptance or the need for socialization. That's always been true. That's just a part of our nature. It's a part of our species to be socially accepted. So even as we develop new technologies to connect more over the internet or whatever else, right? It's funny because think about it, it's not new. Yeah, the technology's new. There's something about that's new, but like, is it really new? The nature of what we're doing is the exact same as what our ancestors were doing and have been doing for so long. It's crazy how long. Even you see it in other animals, right? Like dogs are very social creatures. Cows, lots of organisms are social, and they're motivated socially to perform or to connect with each other in the same way that we do. No, not the exact same way. Like we have language, right? The language is such a powerful tool. Literally, language is our intelligence. The more words that you know, the smarter you are. That's it. That's also something I've been thinking about a lot recently, which has just been like the idea of like, you go to school not to learn anything. I mean, of course, like, when I'm talking about this, I'm disregarding the idea that like there are frameworks with like internal logic that you can learn, that you can extrapolate more information from. For example, like calculus, like there's rules to that language. It's not just words, it's also like these conceptual, cerebral rules that govern the language that are complex. At the same token, it is just words, which perhaps is a little reductive, right? But at the same time, it's interesting because when you think of it that way, you can think of school, whether that be elementary, high school, university, whatever, medical school. It is just a big building with a bunch of rooms filled with people who are all just telling you words. And you have to remember those words and write them down on a piece of paper later or type it up later. But like, that's all you're doing. You know what I mean? There's not like there's nothing else about it. And people will say, this system is outdated. We need to figure out how to update our education system. We're just literally sitting people down in a room and having someone else talk to them. And I say to them, what do you think, like, what do you think this is? Like, the human species, like, that's all we ever do. We just sit down in rooms and talk to each other. Sometimes we do things too, like we can learn skills, right? Drawing or sports or swimming or, sports and swimming is kind of the same thing, but you get the idea. Like there are skills, but that's kind of just with your body. Different aspects of moving your body, different ways, different forms of movement under different contexts, maybe using different technology too. But it's all just moving your body. And even talking is just moving our body too. Just specific movements of the tongue and the mouth and the way in which I exhale air, and that vibrates my vocal cords. And I sort of like bend and shape the air around in my mouth, and that creates different symbols, different noises that you interpret as meaningful in your ear hole. But even more than that, of course, there's technology, like there's a little microphone inside of my phone that translates the vibrations in the air to electrical impulses and signals that are translated to binary and other complex computer languages that is then transmitted. I guess it's more like, into a file, and then I upload that file to YouTube servers, and those computers are then relaying that same information to you, which is far beyond anything that I can possibly comprehend on how it actually functions. But either way, it allows me to just say my thoughts and to show you how I'm making little lines on the paper and talk about my feelings and share it with you, which is really cool. Honestly, it's so dope. I guess I've been talking a lot about other things other than myself in this drawing, which I don't know, maybe you would want to hear more about myself and my experiences drawing this thing, which is possible. I don't know. People ask me a lot when I sell my art in the street. They say, where does your inspiration come from? Where does your inspiration come from? And I always say, like, I don't actually know. Which I don't think is what people often want to hear. Like, I could talk endlessly about different ideas that are formed through the process of creating the different pieces. But I definitely did not have a plan going into this one, for example. But clearly I've already had a lot to say about it, or even just kind of tangentially related to it. But I've decided that my answer to that question of, like, where does it come from? Where does your inspiration come from? Can kind of always be boiled down to the simple idea of, I love doing it. So that's where my inspiration comes from, is just the experience of pleasure that I have from doing it. Like, even now as I'm saying this to you, that I'm drawing, as I'm talking, as I'm drawing, my body and my mind specifically. I also did just drink a cup of coffee, which helps. I do love coffee, but beyond that, the actual act of doing this is a very deeply personal one to me, and I experience a lot of pleasure and fulfillment from doing it. And I can play on the page, it's fun. And I get to just do it. And that's honestly my biggest inspiration, is just the thing that inspires me is the love and fun I have from doing it. Like, I wouldn't keep doing this if I hated it. That would suck. But that's what inspires me. I might have even talked about this in the last one. I do wonder, like, will I always be doing this specific act forever? Like, I did promise myself that I'd always make art and always draw. So I think I'll always draw. But I've been thinking a lot recently about getting into painting, learning how to do colors, things like that, I could get into pottery too, something. I'm not actually sure too much about what I'd want specifically, but I do think that I would like to explore more creative outlets for myself. get into more things. Not, and maybe not even just creative, but like, you know, something else to do with my body. That's not just completely wrapped up in this, because although I think I could do this for many more years before I start like getting a little jaded from it. That'll be interesting when this starts becoming. I'm sure that I'll go through different times in my life where this feels less pleasurable than it does right now. But that's why it would be really nice to have other hobbies, other things that I do that I just do it for myself. You know, I don't record it, I don't put it out. It's not my job. And who knows, maybe I'd lean into that and like it more or less or whatever, you know. We're always changing. Everything's always changing, including the way we feel about the things that are most important to us right now in this moment. You know, they're always changing. And you can I think that can be scary, because it's like, wait, but I love all this stuff and I don't want it to go away. That's true. I think you need to admit that you don't want it to go away, because that's a sad thought. But also, it's gonna go away, which is also a sad thought, but like, it's true. You can't just say like, well, it'll never change, because you're gonna be disappointed when it changes, because it's definitely gonna change. That is just for sure. That is definitely true. It's funny how like there's some things in my life where I kind of feel like it's a belief, you know? Like there's some things where I'm like, yeah, it's like a belief system. And I can't prove it, but it's just kind of like, I believe in that, more or less. But there's some things where it's like, it's so much more than a belief. Like, the idea of everything changes is so much more than just a belief for me. It's like, my whole soul and body feels it. I guess it just means I believe it really strongly, huh? It doesn't actually mean that it's not different than a belief. It's just a really strongly held belief. That'd be so interesting if like that changes, which is funny to say, because like the belief that things change, if it changed, and I started believing like, no, things never change. It's always the same. I'm sure there's some sort of metaphysical, semantical dance you could do to try to figure that out. Like, maybe it's always the present moment, and time is an illusion, so therefore things never change because change is an illusion. Because change requires that you believe in the illusion of time or something. Which is an interesting thought. I don't know if I believe that time is time an illusion or not. Is an interesting thought. I think it probably is an illusion, but it's also like so deeply ingrained into the way that our organism lives, or like probably any animal really, like the experience of time and one moment passing into the other, right? Like, I could believe that. Like, I could believe that time is an illusion in the sense that like perhaps this moment that I'm experiencing and that you're experiencing listening to this was always bound to happen. Like, we are just bearing witness to the inevitable, I guess. What's the word for it? Inevitable passage of time, I guess. And that like every sequence of events, including the ones where people feel very convicted about their choices in the matter, are truthfully just something that they were always going to choose. I even believe that's like probably true in some way. Like, but I think another thing that I realized recently is that I also believe that, yeah, like everything's kind of predetermined, but also humans still have free will. And then it's like, well, how's that possible? If everything's predetermined, then how do you have free will? It's like, well, because we don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, like it is going to happen. It's always going to happen that way. But we don't, that might be like the most basic level of reality, right? But it's not the human reality. It's not the human story. It's a story. It's an intellectual story that we can tell ourselves, but it's not one that we believe in. Not in the same way that I don't know, like, I'm trying to think of an equivalent example of something. like that, right? Where like someone could say like, we're all gonna die, and so like nothing matters, and like they could become depressed. They could get so depressed that they don't do anything anymore. I've been there. I've been so depressed where I don't do anything. That was a hard time, but I do think that was like many, many years ago. So just by the way, don't worry, I'm pretty happy right now. I mean, there's definitely hard things in my life that I'm trying to figure out, but also I'm generally fulfilled and happy. And I will find out. I will figure myself out. But besides the point, you could get a really depressed person that is really confused about where they're going in life or whatever it could be. And then at the same time, if you starved them and they were hungry and you put a sandwich in front of them, they would devour that sandwich. Like, point being that we have human instincts that go far beyond, I suppose, our immediate belief about the world, right? Like, we are governed by the nature of our bodies and how that makes us perceive things, whether we like it or not. We like to believe that like we aren't our bodies, but we very much are our bodies. Our bodies are us, and we are our bodies. If you're hungry, you get mad, you want to go eat something, and you're like, but I'm not, what's that one Snickers commercial? Good branding, you guys. You just made me think of your company. Good job, guys. But you're not you when you're hungry. But it's like, no, you are. Like, you are you when you're hungry. When you're hangry and you get mad, like, that's you. People will say, like, I'm not a mean person. Or I am this. And that is always true about me. And it's like, yeah, but, that's only because you got, like, all the context that's surrounding your existence is also true. Even with my own, right? Like, the thoughts that I'm having right now are only, like, I've eaten this morning, I've had a coffee this morning, and I'm not even mentioning, like, all of my other experiences, right? Like, how I was raised, how old I am, the condition of my health and my body. It's all changing. All influences each other, all interconnected. And there's just no way that you can just definitively say, like, this me is me, but like when I get mad, that's not really me. That's not the real me. Or like whatever else it could be. It's like, no, that's you too. Like, you are you when you're hungry, and you are you when you're full. That's just true, in my opinion. I really believe that opinion, though. Anyways, I'm coming up on an interesting part of this drawing where I'm drawing like the foreground part of this bar, and I'm kind of making the lines go down. And see, there's like this liquid that's pouring out of this cup. Do I distort lines behind it to kind of show like the counter is being refracted through the liquid, or do I just leave it? I think I'm gonna leave it, because I think if I try to add any more lines to that, it's just gonna muddy it. I think it's just gonna make it look weird. Not weird, but I think it's definitely something I've been thinking about a lot of my art recently, which is like I tend to add too much detail, when like just because you add more lines doesn't mean that it's better. You need to be more like, what's the word? Decisive with your lines, efficient with showing like information. Because more is not always better. Oftentimes it's just a very well placed line to represent something that makes it look clean, pleasant to look at. But of course, like, it's all subjective on what you're trying to show in any given moment. Like, it really could be better to have more, worse to have less, vice versa. what sort of style are you going for, you know? It's all about what you want to show. That's the thing I love about art. And I think it's very applicable to many aspects of life. It's just that more aspects of life than we think is that there is always more than just one way to do something. And even then, right? Like, you think, okay, there's more than one way. So how many ways are there? Like maybe 2 or 3, you know? And then when you tell people there's an infinite amount of ways to do anything, then it stresses them out because they're like, I don't know how to decide. They get paralyzed with, decision paralysis. It's like going to the store and there's a billion choices for something. And I don't remember exactly my dad's quote, but it's something that I think about a lot. It's just like, just do it. It's not, not Nike, I guess. My dad is the Nike Corporation. No, just like this idea of like, it's better to do a little something every day than it is to do a lot in one day. If you're working for even just 30 minutes, even that's kind of a long time, maybe just 10 minutes, whatever, and you're just doing it consistently, you'll do way more than any guy who does like, I don't know what the word is, like, is really productive and like can grind, but like maybe only does it once a week or whatever. You can do better work too. Like, this is one of my more favorite pieces I've worked on, and it's definitely taken its time. Like, I mean, I've gone to other things, I worked on other things over the course of it. But I've been pretty patient with this one, and I'm very happy with how it's turned out, just because of the sort of slow formation process of it coming into being, which I'm very happy about. It's like weird because it's not like, definitely more of a cartoony style than my normal stuff. Like, it's not to say that I've never made cartoony stuff. I literally have a cartoon called Jim and Bob. But as far as like my more complicated pieces go, this one is the most, out of the complicated ones, this is like the most cartoony, I think. I don't know. And that's the thing is, right, like, the thing I love about creating, or that the fact that there's like more than just one way to do something, it's just this idea, right, where it's like there are no wrong strokes. It's just about what style you want, and you have to be, it is something you have to consider, right? Like, what do I want? It kind of goes back to like saying the words out loud, right? It gives you the power to understand what it is that you want. So less than being concerned about the right way to do something, all you need to be concerned about is the sort of thing that you want to do. And then from that moment, then you can start thinking about right or wrong, kind of based on that relative sort of thing that you want, I guess. But even still, let's say you mess up in the pursuit of doing something that you want to do, that doesn't really mean anything. Like, it just means it's different than how it existed in your head, and that doesn't mean that it's wrong. And I really think that's an important thing to remember, because nothing will ever be as pure as it is in your head. I forget what, I really do not have the authority to speak on this, but there's some idea, I think, that a Greek philosopher had. There's like another plane of existence, sort of, like an ethereal sort of perfect plane, like a heaven, where like the purest form of objects exists in heaven, and we are always striving for that, but like there is a definitive truth, objective truth of the idea of a perfect table or something, or a perfect drawing, or whatever it could be, and we strive for that, and then, the better that you get at something, the more that you can replicate it, but it's never going to be as perfect as the thing itself that exists in reality out there, which is an interesting idea. But I think the truth is, there is no other realm. The only realm that exists right now is the one that we are experiencing. then I think that can either be really scary or it can be comforting. Because I guess it's this sort of idea of like, whatever you make is the perfect version. Because there really isn't any concept. The reality of a perfect version of whatever doesn't exist. This drawing that I'm working on right now wouldn't exist if I did not make it. Like, even if I thought it in my head, it's like, that's nice, but it's not real. It's not a drawing, it's just a thought. And those are very different things, a thought and an action, right? Very different things. You can't punish anyone for any thoughts that he's had. And thank God, because we all have like intrusive thoughts. Like, what if I would be in so many accidents where, you know, you're driving down the freeway or whatever, and you're like, what if I just ran head on into the I guess the car next to me or whatever. And you're like, yeah, it's a crazy thought. I don't want to do that. Point being, right, that there is a very clear difference between the reality of thoughts and the reality of action. But I think it's also very important to understand that the reality of thought and action are very interrelated, in the sense that usually the thoughts that we have on a regular basis will come to influence our action in some way or another. It doesn't mean that people that are thinking bad thoughts are going to be doing bad things or whatever it could be, right? But it does mean, for example, another piece of wisdom, what you get in is what you get out. And if you're watching a bunch of garbage, I sound like an old man. But, you know, if you're watching stuff that's not nourishing for your soul, and you're watching it consistently, you're not going to be nourishing your soul. And your soul is only going to be able to make what it can make out of that capacity. And I think some people have a higher tolerance. Like, I can really speak for myself here, where I had to cut off TikTok and like mindlessly scrolling as much as possible, because it drained my energy and it made me less creative, because it was, I suppose, I don't know what the word is for it. It made me less creative because, I don't know, like, it drains me whenever I do that. And like, I still spend too much time on the internet probably, but I think in general, I try to limit the stuff that I see to stuff that is, I feel, pretty good for me to watch. You know, like something that's like nourishing for my soul, like what I said. A lot of art stuff I follow. A lot of artists. Things of that nature. And it's not to say that everything I do or perceive on the internet is just like super good for me and I'm super mindful all the time. Definitely, I definitely kind of mindlessly, you know, consume sometimes, like everyone else. But I will say I definitely do it less than I used to. And perhaps it's just because I started drawing, and that gives me something to do with my time. And instead I just kind of ramble. Talk to my phone while I do it. So yeah, now I filled in a lot of the texture that's on the bar, and I've added this shading down here, which I think specifically with these falling guys looks pretty nice, especially this guy. I just think that contrast is really good, and the directions of the line add this feeling of like depth that I think is really satisfying. I wish I added some more people to this before I did the texturing, just because now it's kind of baked in now. Like, I can't really add anything anymore. But yeah, in general, I like it where it is so far. I may want to add more texture to the main guy's sweater, just because I think it's lacking in its depth. So I'm gonna do that. And then once I'm done with that, I might want to add something to this guy's jacket, but I'm not sure yet. So we'll see. But that will come when it comes, you know? That will happen when it happens. No stress. No worries. Everything in its time. Everything takes its time, and I wonder if there's anything that's out of place in the world, you know? Definitely feels that way, doesn't it? When there's just really mad stuff happening. Like, it's hard for me to say. Nothing is out of place. Right as it should be. Maybe, I can say that about my drawings. As I'm adding stuff and taking my time with something like this, that's the beautiful thing about art, is that there isn't this is not a life and death situation. There isn't people that are suffering, the consequences are low. And it helps remind me of that part of my reality, right? And the more that I engage with it, I guess I'm entering a space where I am creating and being productive, but it's not something that is putting me in dire straits, where my decisions are of utmost importance and super stressful and anxiety driven. Like, oh my God, if I mess up this, then yada, 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 something bad happens. And it makes me consider the reality that, in truth, there's very few positions and very few times in which we're put in positions where our decisions are a matter of life and death and really, really matter to a lot of people or whatever. But there are those of us humans that are definitely in the pursuit of that sort of reality. There's people that are putting themselves in harm's way, Think about firefighters or doctors or don't really like the police. But even police, to some extent, like, they are putting themselves in harm's way. They deal with criminals, or ideally, but it's interesting just because, in a perfect world, all the doctors and the policemen and the firefighters are people that are noble, self-sacrificial, empathetic, love their community, whatever it could be, right? Those sort of qualities. And they put themselves in the stressful positions of their decisions mattering, and if it affects people's life and whether or not they'll die in that moment. And I think to myself, that is awesome. There's people that want to do that, and I am not one of those people. I mean, like, if it comes down to it, I like to believe that I could make the hard decisions, to make the right call, to be self-sacrificial, whatever it could be. I hope so. I don't know. I'm not often in a position where I do that, or I'm, that is asked of me. Not yet, anyways, and I hope never. Or maybe not never, but I hope, I hope I can live in peace. All that being said, that's kind of the whole point of, like, pursuing artwork for me, is, like, it is something that I get to do in peace. And it only, like, elevates my peace. It makes me realize, like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's okay right now, And even, I can't say it'll always be okay. It's always going to be okay. That's not true, but you know what? It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Feels good. Take a deep breath and just think about that feeling. That's nice. It's a really nice feeling. I'm very grateful for that. I hope that if anything ever really, really bad happens to me, that I can heal from it. And think about all the bad things that have happened to me, and I guess I've healed from all of it. Maybe there's some wounds that need tending to, you know? Special places that are hurt a little bit worse than others. Gotta change those bandages out. Doesn't mean I'm not healing. Doesn't mean that, you know, I won't need to be ever looked at again. Might always be kind of looked at from time to time. That does not mean I'm not healing, though. I believe I could heal from anything. If not, then I'd die. And then, you know, that's not so bad. It would be a lot like what it was like before I was born. Which I don't remember really being bad. If anything, you know, it wasn't bad. It wasn't great. It wasn't really anything. Yeah, I think I'm done with this guy's texture on this sweater for now. I think I gotta go to class and stuff. But I've appreciated this time drawing with you. Thank you for listening to me ramble, if you got this far. And yeah, definitely either we'll be working on this one or a different one. But I will be drawing something. But thanks for listening, guys, and I hope you have a really good day. And I hope you get the chance to do something that makes you feel happy. And tell people you love them. I love you guys. I'll see ya.